Julian Kusagara, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Jordan. Good to be
Yeah.
here. Thanks for inviting me.
Always, mate. I always love having a bit of a chit chat with you, and I know you and I can talk forever. So I'm definitely excited about this one. But how's things been
Yeah,
in the world?
yeah, good. I've been running around a bit, as I was saying earlier on, just giving that little bit of time to breathe with all the headlines going on. So it's good to get out and get on the ground. And the team's been traveling everywhere. Cairns, been all over Brisbane, Queensland. I got down to Adelaide for a week. I was over in Perth that I was telling you about before. So yeah, it's good to get on the ground and build those partnerships for when the market does come back, which obviously it will very soon. We're all going to be ready to rock and roll with our team and the partnerships in place and the buyers agents on the ground.
Yeah, it's funny when you go through. Like, I'm so used to working from home now. Like, I was doing it even pre-pandemic, but I think now coming out of that, just the validation on having a face-to-face meeting with someone is so different than doing a Zoom meeting or talking on the phone or something like that. So
Yeah, I think it gets the relationship just gets deeper, quick,
yeah.
faster. I think especially when you go to like Adelaide and these smaller, you wouldn't call it a town, but these smaller cities, Perth particularly, and people really appreciate and they go out of their way to spend time with you and take you around, which doesn't happen in Sydney. People don't have that extra time, but yeah, they really appreciate you've taken the time to come all the way to them and build that rapport. And getting those meetings and spending time with people to get to know them was excellent time spent.
Yeah, very nice, mate. I'm jealous of the travels, but I guess back onto sort of that property front. If you did have sort of philosophy around building out your own or a property portfolio, what do you think it would be?
I guess, as a business or even, as we've created our business around three key pillars, which was low risk, positive cash flow, and potential for growth. So they're, I guess, the three pillars that we underlies the foundation of the business, but and in my own philosophy. But I guess that, a lot of it's around the individual circumstances. So, we have doctors who buy multiple properties, blocks of units, medical professionals, dentists, and then we have, an individual who just wants to get on the property ladder and just buy her first property and not be reliant on, a marriage or anything else to do that, just be independent and get on the ladder. People who want a land bank for the next generation, they know they're going to no ties to that property or land, but they're happy to build their generational wealth. So we spend a lot of time getting to know the customer, getting to know their circumstances, getting to know their background and their mindset. So both Luke are big advocates around mindset and mental health, and we both are lifeline counselors. And so for us, it's really trying to understand the client. And then that, we don't even talk about property in those first discovery calls or two. It's because it's about them and understanding them. And I feel then the strategy comes. So no, we don't even talk about a property until we get to that strategy stage. And that's where, wonderful software like Game Plans assist us on building the commercial modeling wrapped around, the personal, the personal circumstances and goals that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And I love the three, right? Because the second two are, you could say it's quite common. You do want a positively geared cash property, and then also growth. But that first one on low risk, I think, is really important. It's not something a lot of people touch on. Is there like certain thresholds or metrics or anything that you look at to determine that low risk side of things?
Yeah, I think the low risk really comes from, what is high risk? A high-rise apartment, we wouldn't touch with a barge pole, and most buyers agents that I know don't go there either. Buying in a mining town, buying in a town just got a one-trick sort of pony recipe. That to me sets up. It's a little bit of high. I'm not saying it's a bad. Could be a bad investment, but it could be a little bit less opportunity. I personally bought in areas that relied on one industry type, and then a flood comes along or a drought comes along and wipes that town out for a time. So they're a little bit higher risk. Not saying again you wouldn't do it, but these are the things about low risk. And most of our clients are wanting to follow that side, but one of them, positive cash flow. So not everyone wants positive cash flow. Someone, a medical professional or a high income earner, they don't really need cash flow at the time. So, that's where we find that balance between spending a little bit more money and putting them into areas using our data-led approach to put them into areas that's going to get that capital growth and not so focused on cash flow, which has been quite easy, admittedly, over the last, say 18 months to 2 years, particularly in some of the areas that we're heavily buying in, such as Brisbane and Central Coast and some parts of Melbourne.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because a lot of people can listen to a podcast like this and take away, okay, I need cash flow and I need growth, but then, you know, not apply the other metrics around it in terms of, well, what are those things that are high risk that I can avoid comfortably and still get those two things somewhere else. So
yeah, I mean, we've seen regional markets work really well, right, over these last 18 months or so, but before that, people were selling regional markets just because it was there, potentially could have been an easy sell, and there were good yields in those areas. But if there's no growth for 10 years, then you've got to balance up whether that was the right investment at the time.
yeah, spot on. And speaking of understanding if it is the right investment at the time, if you did have an opportunity to go back and talk to young Julian, what would you tell yourself when you first started building a portfolio?
Probably would have spent less time in the pub, and I could have bought one a bit earlier, but I don't regret that. I guess Jordan, probably like a lot of people, got caught up with the spruiker, the guy in the white shoes and the nice suit, and bought a well, I mentioned before, a high-rise apartment in Sydney at the boom of the market in 2001, something like that.
Wow.
So it was a long time ago, and those mistakes were eased over a good period of time of having time in the market. But at that time, that property didn't do anything for 5-6 years. So yeah, that probably would have, I didn't really do my own personal research, Jordan. Much easier today. I've been listening to podcasts for 10 years, and now there's hundreds of them. The information is really valuable. Back then, I'm not older than you, but there weren't a lot of books. So you had, your standard books that are still on my bookshelf over there that you could read. But there wasn't a lot of other places you can go. The only other place back then was the whole scene of the seminar scene, and the seminar scenes were only run by spruikers.
And
So
when that's your only source of education, like I can definitely see it too. If you didn't have all these podcasts and you didn't have all these books or YouTube channels or whatever else is out there, and you wanted to go to a professional, a buyer's agent wasn't necessarily a thing back in 2001. And the only professional you could go to was someone standing at a seminar. Like it's totally understandable how you get caught up in it.
Yeah. So, that's now in hindsight. I know that now. And that's why I love it when our clients come to us with lots of questions, and because they've done their research, which is wonderful. It puts you in a much better position. And when I hear people who haven't done their research, you almost finish the call with a prospect at that time and feel, I think they're going to get eaten up by a spruiker, because they're saying all the things that what they normally put down into their selling pitches.
Yeah, I've had a lot of those conversations. It's so hard because you don't want to come out and say, no, you're wrong, you got to go my way, because then you can feel like a bit of a spruiker for the unknown. But
yeah,
it's so hard to have that conversation.
It is a tricky one. I mean, I never go down, I never want to bash a competitor or say anything around anyone, but it's just more giving the reasons why, the pros and cons, and let them and suggest why we suggest this way. And history can show things as well if you use data to show growth in certain areas, and also circumstances. The amount of times you hear people, depreciation schedule, like on a new property, like, but you're only earning $65,000. Tax isn't a problem for you at the moment, so little things like that, then that you can see where they got that from.
Yeah.
They've gone down that route of a house of land package, and which, again, I'm not anti house of land packages. I bought many myself through my journey. It's just about what was right for the time and what's right for the individual.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I'm glad you mentioned a few mistakes there. And you don't have to get into too much detail around sort of your current portfolio or anything else like that. But did you address any of those mistakes? What have you done to change it? Has there been anything that you've sold or anything else along that on the process?
Yeah, well, we've probably made a few mistakes. I guess that comes through just being active and being emotional around building wealth. And, it didn't come from a background, my wife or I, that rich dad, poor dad sort of conversation didn't happen in that sense. My migrant parents who bought a house, paid it off, and worked, 2 jobs to do that. So it wasn't really talked about. It was more about how my parents' dining room table discussion about, how do we help others? And so they were sending money back overseas and helping their families and friends and relatives. And that's kind of what we discussed more than how do we build wealth. So, which is a good lesson now in my life as an adult. And, I use those lessons with my kids, but from a finance perspective, we didn't really talk about that. It's more about hard work and generosity and how to help others. But I went down that. So we didn't buy much more for a little while after we got married, because then talk about individual circumstances. You have 2 kids back to back. Wife has to take time off work, so you just consolidate for that period. Plus, we had a mortgage, and then we, had a second child, bought the big family home, and put a lot of money into that mortgage. And then we careers started taking off once the kids got a little bit older for both of us, and started getting executive roles and earning very good money. Worked overseas for many years as an expat. It had tax benefits that way as well. So that's when we came back in 2012 and really went hard. And in one particularly, we bought 6 properties. Again, because the bank allowed it. So this is before, pre the Banking Royal Commission.
Yeah.
I always say to people, it's partly half tongue in cheek, but I don't recall signing a lot of loan documents, but I'm sure we did, but I'm sure they were just the back pages, sign it. And we kept getting loans, and we kept buying properties. So, looking back, put us in a very good situation now, because a lot of those areas were, a couple of those properties were regional, and some of them were new, brand new house and land package. So we bought land, put a house on. And some of them are in, Sydney and Brisbane, bought 3 or 4 in Brisbane. So now, these have put us in a good position because of what's happened in the last 2 years in Brisbane market particularly. And then we've seen some good rises, I think in 17 as well, around Sydney.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds like you've definitely grown a pretty extensive portfolio. And I guess typically that's kind of how I see, how my journey went is I was on the corporate ladder, earning some decent coin, and then, you progress into wanting to invest and build wealth for your future. But then all of a sudden you find yourself in this point where you've got this passion for property, and you really want to sort of motivate it or progress into a career around doing something in the space. How did that look like for you? And what was that moment, or was there a moment where you went, well, I actually want to turn this into a full-time career? And did you transition straight away? Did you do it slowly? How did that all look?
Yeah, I guess it took a while, because you've heard of the term where you're talking about corporate, the golden handcuffs were well and truly tied on my on my wrist. And my wife's always been very supportive of me, and I tried a technology startup, actually similar to what you've done in the SaaS space. That raised quite a bit of money, and but that didn't quite work out. We needed an ATO legislation to help us really take off, and ran out of money. In classical story in software. But then, went back in the corporate world and, worked for a couple of international companies, either traveling a lot over to Europe or setting up a company in Australia for an American firm. That was all great, but I guess my passion was property. But then enter private school fees. You're a long way away from that, Jordan. But these are all the things you've got to consider. And so that came along, and it's like, oh dear, okay, I'd have to hang on a bit longer. So I'd spent a lot of that time doing that research, and that's when the podcast kicked in. They started really coming through thick and fast, and some of the great podcasts out there and books, and then just the buyer's agent sort of world started to grow. And it's about who you talk to, who you spend some time with as well. There are good conversations outside of the barbecues, which I don't really talk about property when I'm at barbecues, because I do it all day. I'd rather listen to everyone else at the barbecue who are all the experts tell me how to invest. And then I bumped into Luke, my business partner, one day, and we have a long history. We actually, our first ever jobs, we worked together back in a different land when I first. Luke's first job and my second sort of went to uni for a couple of years and came out and went into the travel industry, and we worked together in a travel company. And so that was a great time, a lot of partying and, Friday night drinks, things like that. So we got to know each other, but then, you go different journeys, and Luke went overseas and I went into loyalty marketing and sort of forged a big career in there. And then we caught up, and he's starting a business, and sort of said, you should do something together. And it's like, mate, how can I leave the corporate world and start something from scratch? So, but he went away and started a mentoring business, and that didn't really connect, that really needed a buyer's agency behind it. Yeah. And Luke had built a very big portfolio, into the high 20s. So he really understood property and buying. and used a buyer's agent to help him buy a lot of those as well. So yeah, so we would actually, I think where we really started getting serious was we used to give blood and plasma every, I think every 2 weeks at the Red Cross. And so we sit there with our arms out and sit there for an hour and talk about property. And so that was kind of where the passion and the ideas were flying back and forth. And then I guess, one of those times in life I got made redundant from this big American company, and they paid me quite well. And I thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the calling. Everything kind of aligned. My wife is, supportive of me sort of following my passion and my dream. So I've always wanted, I worked for entrepreneurial companies and really amazing entrepreneurs. And so I learned a lot from them, watching them work. And the businesses where I worked in were entrepreneurial too. You got a business, you started, you built it up from scratch and tried to grow it into a big thing. And, as a mini business within a big one. So yeah, I've always had that passion in my blood. So it was clear I was going to do it. Like you said, when I guess the gates open and I took the plunge.
It's incredible, mate, and I love that you had the partner to help you through that process as well. I think it's so important just to have someone who you can bounce off ideas with. And it's funny, most people will do that over a beer or something, but to do it over sharing blood, I think it's pretty special.
Yeah, that's true. Giving blood over beer, yeah.
Well, it just sort of shows you like your whole foundation of the business is based on giving back to people, right? Which I think is really special. So well done, mate. And I might be putting you on the spot a little bit here, but if you had sort of one favorite property one-liner, what would it be?
It's probably one I use a lot with clients. Really, it's a basic one, basically around property is really a game of finance as opposed to a game of property. And so we often say if we get that finance piece right, get the right team on board. We use a acronym called turning on your tap. So create your team, take action, and then have patience. It's a long-term game. And so, yeah, creating that team of getting your finance right is really important, because then you can really set up and stretch and build your portfolio. And again, Game Plans is great for that. The software to put that in place to help us understand that by putting in lots of metrics into the software to help us plan. With that P in the patience, to be patient and let the property do its thing.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. I love the acronym, and you're spot on. Having that patience in the planning side of things allows people to go, okay, well, we can actually do this. We don't have to go crazy right now, and it's going to be the end of the world if we don't do it. We've got time up our sleeve. We just have to put a plan around it. So yeah, no, I love it, mate. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. Hopefully I can get you back on again soon, and I'll throw a new set of questions at you.
Sounds good. Enjoy it. Thanks for inviting me.